Damos comienzo al Radio Careta entrevista del día de la fecha para hablar con el amigo IAN BRENNAN, productor musical, ganador del premio Grammy y una figura que ha transformado la manera en que entendemos la música como una herramienta social. ¿Por qué? Porque IAN ha producido más de 40 discos internacionales en los 5 continentes y trabajó con artistas que van desde países como Ruanda hasta Azerbaiyán, rescatando voces de comunidades marginadas, como lo hizo en la placa que escuchábamos recién, Another Mississippi Sunday Morning, en donde grabó junto a 12 hombres un disco bajo el sello Glitterbed Records en Pachman Farms. Hablamos de una de la cárcel de máxima seguridad del Mississippi. ¿Entienden desde dónde? O sea, ya nombramos a Ruanda, a Azerbaiyán y a Mississippi. Todavía no arrancamos la entrevista. Además, IAN BRENNAN es autor de 9 libros, incluido Missing Music's Voice from Where the Dirt Rose Ends, su último libro, y es un ferviente defensor de la música como un medio para democratizar el arte. Con una filosofía que desafía a las industrias comerciales, IAN ha demostrado que la innovación en la música suele emerger desde los márgenes y no desde el centro. Su trabajo no solo amplifica voces marginales, sino que también genera cambios tangibles en comunidades de todo el mundo. Nos hemos encontrado, gracias a los amigos de Glitterbed, con el señor IAN BRENNAN. Le hemos solicitado una entrevista, nada más y nada menos, y a esto nos vamos a dedicar hoy. Recién escuchábamos uno de los temas que daba inicio a Another Mississippi Sunday Morning, un disco que él fue a grabar ahí, al corazón del Mississippi, y realmente detrás de máxima seguridad. Y para hablar de todas estas cosas y de todas estas vivencias de IAN BRENNAN, es que ya está conectado con nosotros. Hello, IAN, are you listening me good? I'm Manu, I'm here with Raúl.
Yes, hello.
Excellent. Raúl, todo tuyo.
Perfect. Jan, thanks for your time, for your support. We are live. We are going to start with the interview. So please tell us your full name, where are you from, and how old are you?
My name is IAN BRENNAN, and I'm from California, and I'm very old.
Okay, I'm over 40, so it's okay. No problem with that. And can you tell us which is your first memory of you listening to music?
The first memory is probably not memorable because it was something I just always remember doing.
Okay. You were always involved with music.
Yes. So it's hard to remember not listening to music.
Beautiful. And can you tell us which was your first instrument and which was the first song that you learned?
My first instrument was drums, and then I quickly moved to guitar. And, I learned songs like Christmas songs and folk songs, Pete Seeger songs and from the American Songbook, that sort of thing, like Tom Dooley, that sort of stuff.
Okay. And can you tell us, were there any places to study music for free, or you have to pay always to study music?
I didn't study music. I was self-taught, but they were not good. In terms of where we were, they weren't good at providing music schools. They basically did not exist.
Okay. And which was the first concert that you went?
I think the first concert I went was probably with my mom. I took her to see Tom Jones, who was a big sex symbol in the 70s, and And so we went to see him. That's the first one I remember. Yeah.
Beautiful. And Tom Jones, it was on a big place or in a small place?
It was medium at the time. It had a circular stage where he was, in the round, and it was a stage that they used to have south of San Francisco where it would rotate in a circle so that people in different parts of the audience would be able to see the front of the performer. And I think I was the only male in the room. That's how big of a sex symbol he was at the time.
Beautiful. No, it happens. It happens. You were small. You were with your mom. It's okay. Everything was okay.
No. It was a positive experience.
Exactly. And a few days ago, Glitter Beat Records released another Mississippi Sunday Morning. It was the second time that you went to Parchman Farms Prison to make a record. Can you tell us what were the emotions that surrounds you when you were there?
Well, I mean, the first time in particular, there was a lot of joy and relief and shock because I didn't know what would be there. I wasn't even certain that I would be allowed to go in, and who knew what would be there musically. And I was happy just to have the experience, even if there wasn't a record. I didn't know that there would be. And, as soon as the first person sang, they were great. And then another person got up and sang and they were great. And, it just exceeded expectations, wildly. And so going back, it was a little bit more familiar, the space and some of the same people. There were some new people as well. But it was, in many ways, even a deeper experience because there was a even deeper level of intimacy since some of the men, it was a return experience to have again.
Ok. Manu, ¿tenés alguna pregunta para hacer? ¿Querés hacerle una pregunta?
No, estaría bueno que traduzcas un poquito si querés.
Bueno, Jan, I'm going to...
No.
Sí, I'm going to make a little translation for the Spanish listeners, just up to here. Bueno, estamos hablando con IAN Brennan. Él es nacido en Estados Unidos, en este momento está en Italia. Estamos haciendo la entrevista y, no quiso dar exactamente su edad. Nos estaba contando que por ejemplo, le pregunté por su primer recuerdo escuchando música y dice que no tiene ninguno en particular porque estuvo siempre rodeado de música y alrededor de música, así que no tiene ningún recuerdo exacto. Su primer instrumento fue la batería, después empezó a tocar la guitarra y tuvo la posibilidad de producir un montón de discos, un montón de canciones de diferentes artistas. Después lo que nos estaba contando que él no estudió verdaderamente música, que es autodidacta, y otra cosa también que nos dijo que era muy difícil en ese momento encontrar en Estados Unidos alguna manera de aprender música, que era realmente difícil y que él tocaba en ese momento un montón de música folk y artistas de ese estilo. Y también le preguntamos cuál fue su primer concierto y nos dijo que fue Tom Jones con la madre, y dice que fue una experiencia bastante positiva, dice que él se dio cuenta que era el único hombre que estaba en ese momento, pero fue una experiencia gratificante, fue en un lugar muy lindo y la experiencia de poder ver a Tom Jones en vivo fue realmente buena. También le pregunté después, ya empecé directamente con lo que es el proyecto Another Mississippi Sunday Morning, que fue traducido por Glitter, fue editado, sí. Fue editado por Glitter Beat Records. Salió hace un par de días, nada más tuvimos la primicia de tener eso, gracias al Glitter Beat Records y a IAN Brennan, la primicia, y la verdad que es un disco increíble. Y lo que nos estaba contando él es la segunda vez que tiene la oportunidad de grabar. La primera vez que llegó a Parchman a la prisión fue es en Mississippi, en el sur de Estados Unidos, y dice que tenía realmente miedo porque no sabía si iba a poder grabar, no sabía, él ya estaba contento que lo hayan dejado pasar en esa celda en esa prisión de máxima seguridad, no sabía cuál iba a ser el resultado, y a medida que iban cantando los músicos, las personas que estaban envueltas en el primer proyecto, dice que fue increíble, y que volvió, y la experiencia es buena.
Hi, Jan. I want to know, how do you find these stories and how do you decide what project to take on and work?
Yeah, we were fortunate enough that when we've gone places, we've met great people, and so basically it's just a faith that when we go somewhere, there's going to be great voices that deserve to be heard, and often those are people that are not listened to. In other words, they're not the people that are pushing for attention. They're the people you have to seek out. And often the shyer people are the ones that end up having the strongest voices and the most interesting things to say. And as far as places, it's just that, there's 206 nations on the planet Earth, but we hear disproportionately from America and from England and from, some Spanish-speaking countries to some degree as well. And then a lot of other countries basically don't exist internationally. I mean, you don't hear their music, except, maybe somebody listens to them privately at home, but you certainly don't hear them in an airport, and you certainly don't hear them, on the radio most of the time, unless it's a specialty show. And in fact, a lot of the smaller countries, many people don't know they exist. That's what I've discovered. So when you talk about a country like Comoros or Suriname or Bhutan, a lot of people really aren't even sure what continent they may be on. And meanwhile, they can name you, probably 30 bands they like from England.
Exactly. We can understand. We are from South America, for example, Uruguay and that kind of things. It's hard to find mainstream, maybe. And Jan, you're interested in making field recordings in places with almost no outside resources, sources. What you are saying. And can you tell us what do you think about people learning music through YouTube?
Well, I mean, I think, people learning music in any way they can is good. I think that in general, unfortunately, around the world, the link of music being passed down is largely broken. Recently we were recording in Southern Africa, and a man had lived in the same village, a fairly big village, like 10,000 people, his whole life, and he could not think of one single person that he knew that sang. And that's shocking, because I've guaranteed if you went back 2 generations, probably everyone sang, like it wouldn't even be a question or something to think about. And so, it's good if people are playing music live, and it's even better if they're playing music simply for the sheer joy of playing music and not wanting any reward in return.
I completely agree. This radio is about that. So
yes,
we are completely agree about that. And how do you feel? You know what is going on? For example, we have the chance to meet people from Malta, and what is going on with the Catalan language in Catalonia. How do you feel about language when you, for example, you record it and they sing or they make music in their own language? How do you feel, for example, French people singing in English? How do you feel about that?
I think people should be free. I support that, but I think people should not be doing it for the wrong reasons. So if it's really freedom of choice, that's very different than if somebody's doing it because they feel like it's the only choice they have, or that it's something they should do, or that they have to do. I think undoubtedly all of us communicate differently in our mother tongue, whatever that might be. There's a freedom, and people that are multilingual like yourself, oftentimes you hear that shift, like if they are speaking a language that they know very well, but then they shift into their mother tongue, you hear freedom. And if they shift into dialect, you hear even more freedom. In other words, when people are speaking in dialect here in Italy, I know that when they're speaking in dialect without knowing the words, because I can tell what's happened, that there's a shift in freedom. And, there's so many languages in the world, over 5,000 still living languages. And yet, what do we hear? We hear, English over and over again. We hear Spanish a lot as well, and Hindi to some degree. And internationally, that's pretty much it. So people say, oh, well, it's great, K-pop, or it's great Afro beats, but or Amapiano, but almost all of them are singing in English or some dialect of English. So it's still, I'm not saying it's not good, but I'm saying it could be different, particularly when we think about Nigeria, where, is a huge country, the most populous country in Africa. And we're hearing from essentially one city, and and individuals that are representing largely economically advantaged individuals, and yet in their country they have over 500 languages. So wouldn't it be beautiful? The next step, hopefully, would be to hear some of those languages, and not just English.
Completely agree. I'm living in Catalonia. I'm a Spanish person. I'm a Spanish talker, and I always ask people in Catalonia to speak me in Catalan. So I love that. Manu?
Okay, yeah, you produced The Good Ones, a band from Rwanda who later plays in Tiny Desk in New York. How do you find that band? It's a history behind that.
Yeah, it is. I mean, they were Marlena Uma-Hozadeli and I, my wife, who does all the photography and video. That was the first record we did, and that was in 2009 that we met them. And her mother is from Rwanda, and we'd gone to Rwanda with her mother for the first time that she'd returned there in many decades, the first time since the genocide. And we figured we would look for music. And so, Rwanda physically is relatively small. It's a very densely populated country, but physically it's fairly small. The roads aren't particularly good or weren't at the time. So getting places could take quite a long time, but still you can reach pretty much every corner of the country, not every village, but different directions you can get there. And we found a lot of music, but a lot of it was just so. It was not bad, it just wasn't really compelling. And after being there for almost 2 weeks, the final night, we were able to meet the Good Ones, and instantly, without them even playing a note, I knew that there was something special going on. And then when they played the first song they played is the first song on their first album, which is the song Sarah, then I really knew. And then when the lyrics were translated later, I even knew more, because it's complete poetry. It's a song about a woman who has AIDS and tries to go to the witch doctor, and everybody rejects her family rejects her lover rejects her. It's just a beautiful, very deep song. And so we've been fortunate enough to go on to make 5 albums with them. The 5th album will come out later this year. And also, for them to have opportunities to go to England, to go to mainland Europe, to go to the United States twice, and to go to Australia. So it's been quite incredible.
Beautiful experience.
Hablamos nosotros de Ruanda acá varias veces y de los conflictos internos. Increíble historia.
La verdad.
We talked here once about Rwanda and its internal conflict, about the communities there. I never talk about with some person who walked that land. Can you tell me, resume shortly, how is Rwanda today? Is the conflict resolved? I imagine that that history is floating in the air everywhere.
Well, I think a very important thing with conflict is that to make a concerted effort to correct what went wrong. And so you see after World War II that there's differences between Germany and Italy with fascism. Germany made really concerted efforts to confront their history. And now today, it's having trouble moving to the right, but in general, it's one of the most liberal big countries in the world. Italy did not confront it actively, and we see an even more rapid leaning to the right and return towards fascism potentially. So there's a difference there. And so in Rwanda, they did something very similar, and they continue to work at it annually, every year. And people work at this. Now, that's not to say that there probably aren't lingering, effects of it. But in fact, they are in a position where I think it's important, and that is that there's a union. It's somewhat of a negative union, but there's a union, and that is that almost everybody was affected by it. So there's no one that's exempt from it. And so they have to find a way in this relatively physically small, they're the most densely populated country in Africa. So this relatively small place, they have to find a way to get along. They don't really have a choice otherwise.
Perfect.
Excellent.
Sigo, Manu. Ian, we are going on with another Mississippi Sunday morning. In another Mississippi Sunday morning, there were 12 men participating in the recording session. Do you think that you were close to understand what they want to express?
Well, I think that, they were free to express whatever they wanted. And the nice thing about the second album versus the first one was that with the second album, they wrote a lot of their own songs. So, so it was even more personal. But I think what is in many ways most striking about the Men, besides their vulnerability, is that when they do cover songs, usually they don't sound anything like the song that the original version. Like it's almost a new song in a true folk music tradition. Like if you go back and try to find the original version of some of the songs they're singing, it sounds nothing like what they've sung, nothing. And they've literally transformed it and made it their own. And so, they're expressing a lot of things and a lot of complexity, but a big part of that that's important is that they're expressing, hope and forgiveness, and it's not all negative emotions. A lot of it is you hear the growth in the voices of the individuals. A lot of these individuals that are in their 60s, one man, Mr. Hemphill, has been there since he was in his early 20s. He's been there his whole life. He's serving a life sentence. And if you listen to his voice, I think you know that this is a different person than he was when he did whatever he did when he was in his early 20s. I mean, a completely different person. He's grown, he's changed, and I think in many ways probably has worked harder on himself than somebody who might not have had such a horrific history.
I have to make this question. Do you think that you can, the singing, you can separate it from the artist? You can separate the work from the artist?
Well, I think to some degree you can, because usually when we hear something we don't really know, right? We're just hearing a voice, and what we're listening for, I think, historically, is we're listening for honesty, and I think we get very little of that in mass media. We get a lot of fakery, and in fact, most of what people are listening to now are things that did not happen. They were simulated, they're corrected, they're edited. So, with most pop stars, it's like, well, what do they really sound like? I don't think we know. We know what they sound like when they're manipulated, but we don't know what they really sound like. And so with these individuals, I think you can hear in their voices a striking amount of vulnerability that you wouldn't hear, maybe even from somebody with less rough and tough and violent histories. And so, the stories on the one hand are important and inform what they do, but on the other hand, I think that, every voice has to stand on its own and every song has to stand on its own. And unfortunately, the hype machine in the music industry, it's the opposite, where people are propped up by sometimes, there's a story that oftentimes is false anyway, and people kind of are primed to like it, as opposed to listening more openly to voices and finding ones that really resonate with them, not on an intellectual level, but on an emotional level.
And why do you think that for saying in a way, authenticity is not a value in the industry now?
Well, I mean, I think that it maybe they think at least that it doesn't sell. They're certainly not as in control of it. What the corporations are very good at doing is they're very good at simulating things, and so that started in the early 90s with Nirvana, where indie rock, alternative rock became everything. Suddenly everybody was indie, everybody was alternative. And now here we are, almost 30 something years later, and we've got people that look like people used to look when they were making underground music, but the music they're making is as commercial as could be, as slick and as smooth as could be. And so there isn't really true authenticity, but they'll claim there is, and I think when people claim something, the real critical thinking that's missing now a lot is when someone claims it, you should usually look in the opposite direction. If somebody says, I'm not a liar, it's like, you better look very closely at what they're telling you. Why are they telling me they're not a liar? Somebody tells me they're authentic. Why are they telling me this, right? Somebody tells me that they're a survivor. Why are they telling me this? Whereas people that are truly authentic, they don't talk about authenticity. They're just truthful. They're just being themselves.
Exactly, I completely agree. It's like a joke. When you have to explain a joke, it's not more a joke.
Yeah.
Completely exactly the same, I think.
Estamos hablando con el productor IAN Brennan, la última de mi parte, amigo Raúl. IAN, you critique you criticize the nepotism in academia, music, and highlight that revolution that comes from the bottom up. Do you think there are ways to give creativity power back to local communities in today's music landscape?
Yeah, I think the way to do it is that the communities have to take it and not be passive. And so, unfortunately, we've been conditioned to be recipients of music and to feel like music is outside of us and it's something you have to purchase. So you think about Taylor Swift on her American tour, the average ticket price was $1,000. That's the average ticket price, right? And that's fine. If someone has that money, they want to spend that, and she brings joy to people. That's there's no protest against that. The issue is that people have music in them already, and they don't have to buy it. They can if they want, but they don't have to. And we don't need to be passive in the process. We should be active in the process. And so I'm hopeful that music is being made and could be made to a large degree. The question is whether it will ever bubble up again. You know, that it's with the corporations being in such great control, where you have three corporations controlling over 75% of the music on the planet Earth. You know, they don't want that music to rise up, but it's really counterproductive in a sense for them, because all popular music came from these communities. You know, so if you talk about fado, if you talk about tango, if you talk about blues, you know, you talk about country music, you talk about bluegrass. I mean, where did they come from, right? They didn't come from the aristocracy. Quite the opposite.
Perfect. Great explanation. Ian, how do you make the search to find record labels that are able to release that kind of albums?
Well, I've been fortunate enough to work with a few different labels, but they struggle, you know, meaning some of the labels that we did a lot of records with, one went out of business, another one is kind of ceased operations. So there are very few. And some of the medium-sized labels have occasionally taken projects on, but for their scale, these projects are too small. So they need to make more money. They're not looking to make millions, but they need to make something. And the reality is that these kind of projects don't make money. You know, I mean, literally do not make money. They lose money, but they serve a purpose. And I think that their life will be much longer. In other words, it very possibly, this will be music that somebody might be listening to a year from now or 10 years from now, as opposed to a lot of the stuff that is hyped disappears so quickly. It's so ephemeral now, because there's over 13 million artists right now on Spotify. 13 million. Right? And most of them have less than 10 followers. So, you know, it comes, it goes very quickly. And yet, I think if people are given a chance to hear it, when they hear something very real, right? When they hear Chavela Vargas, when they hear Nick Drake, when they hear Nina Simone, I think people respond to that if given the chance. But unfortunately, most people have not heard those voices.
Exactly. We have only three more questions. Jan, what do you think about COVID? What happened with COVID?
Well, I mean, I think it was you know, a disaster, obviously, and I think we probably face similar things in the future. We need to unite and not be divisive with one another. We need to share resources. Because certainly as our populations grow and we encroach more on nature, there's going to be other new diseases that are going to arise. And so we need to be prepared to deal with that. I think that, you know, people think of COVID as something that happened and that was it. But I think there could be worse things ahead. And I don't mean that in an apocalyptic way. I just mean we shouldn't feel like, okay, now we're safe, because it doesn't correlate. In other words, if something new comes along, it has no memory of whether there was something before. It either comes along or it doesn't. But you know, there were some positive impacts. I think some people did become more open, you know, because of being closed off and had more time to reflect. But unfortunately, I think post-COVID, a lot of that dissipated with the rapidity of you know, corporate life and the rat race that most people are faced with.
Exactly. Where were you when the COVID starts?
Well, we were in America at the time working, and Italy was the first country to close down, and it was the first city to close down, and then the first country to close down. And so we were watching this happen, you know, where one city in Italy closed down, another one closed down. and it seemed temporary. And then Italy closed down, so we got home, and then within days, it followed that most places in the world also had changed, in a way that didn't seem possible,
Exactly.
as it began,
Exactly, completely agree. Two more questions. Can you tell us something about your future music plans?
Well, I mean, we're just more than anything just going to try to continue to go on, and that's always the big question. Is we've got a lot of records that are done, and you were asking before about labels, and it's like, well, hopefully we can find ways that they can be supported, be released and be heard by great shows and stations like yours, and have support where people have a chance to hear them and see what they feel about it. But we're going to try to continue. It's a money-losing labor of love, but we intend to do it for as long as we can, as long as we're physically able, and as long as the governments allow us to, with travel and that sort of thing. And so we're hopeful. We're gonna try to keep on going.
Perfect. Keep on going. Feel free to express whatever you want in this radio. You have the door open always here in this radio. So it's a pleasure to us to speak with people like you, Jan. We are really happy to meet you. So the last question, can you tell us, just to finish the interview, we are going to play I Won't Complain. Can you tell us something about that particular song?
Yeah, that's one of the elder individuals, and this is someone who was a rock and roll singer by his description when he was young. So he's more practiced than a lot of the other individuals. Many of them are not singers traditionally, and I think there's a depth in his voice that I think comes from age. A lot of times, our society and mass media tends to globally worship youth, and yet a lot of the greatest voices, I think, are transformed by time and they become different, but in some ways I think even stronger. So you listen to Frank Sinatra towards the end of his life. I think he was an even better singer. Not technically, not in terms of being smooth, but there was an even greater depth and texture. Merle Haggard, same thing. Like towards the end of his life, he was always a great singer. He was a great singer when he was in his 20s, but I think he got even better. So when you're listening to hear a man who's in his 70s who's been imprisoned, I think you're hearing somebody that can sing in a way that probably only he could with those experiences. And when he was a young man as a rock and roll singer, he was probably really, flashy and good, but I don't think probably had the ability to move people as much emotionally.
Beautiful. And how do you feel about a person in prison that sings "I Won't Complain"?
Well, I think that there's a lot of humility there. And I think that there's a lot to learn from the individuals there, and in terms of their perspective, because when they say things like "I won't complain," or one of the other songs is talking about the fact that the person is fortunate to still be alive, and "Stand for You." One of the songs he's talking about the fact that you individually have to take responsibility for whatever you do, that no one else can do that but you. I think these are things that are really fundamental, but oftentimes are lost, and so to hear people in these environments expressing that, they really know it, because daily they're confronted with the mistakes they've made, and so they've worked hard to try to correct them in most cases.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Ian. It's been a pleasure to speak with you. We completely agree with everything that you say. You have the...
Lo esperamos en Argentina, Ian, decirle.
Sí, bueno, if you have the chance to go to Argentina or Spain or something, a place like that, please let us know and we keep on talking, okay? Thank you very much.
That would be nice. That would be very nice.
Of course.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Thanks so much. Bye. See you.
What's best for me? Although my weary eyes, they cannot see. He been so good to me. He been so good to me. More than this world can ever be. He dries all of my tears away. Turn my midnight into day. So I say thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. I won't complain.